Do you want to take your life to the next level? Join us as we learn from real people who've overcome real problems with real solutions. Welcome to the Unstoppable Growth Podcast with your hosts, Rebecca and Tim Lindsay.
All right. Welcome to the Unstoppable Growth Podcast. I am so excited that you are here, whether you're listening or whether you're looking at our video. We have Jessica on board today. She is awesome. A lot of you are going to go, oh, I love Jessica because she's not as loud as Brian, or she's not as loud as Tim. And she's more like a wonderful Rebecca, my wife.
Both threes.
Threes? Oh, it goes in threes?
No,
What?
we're both threes.
Oh, you're both
Enneagram.
threes on the Enneagram. That's right.
Yes. 2 3s and 2 7s. This should be fun.
It should be fun. It should be fun. That's true. But so good. So we have, that's really good to know that there's introvert threes and there's extrovert threes. And are there any introvert sevens?
I bet there are. I'm surprised sometimes when I speak to people who I would think would be a 7.
Yeah.
My former CEO, for example.
Yeah.
Really charismatic. I mean, you just thought of him as a people person.
Yeah.
He was an introvert.
Yeah.
Like, he got his energy being alone.
Yes.
And it was a performance when he was in front of people.
Yeah.
But I was surprised to hear that. I worked for him for like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And he's your typical CEO, tall, great hair.
Yeah.
And then we did the disc profile. And he came out as an introvert. And he was like, oh, yeah. He's like, this is a big show I put on for everybody.
So hang on a second. So a great CEO has a great head of hair.
He had a great head of hair. Yeah. He did.
So I'm taking off my hat now, and so everybody can see. And please take off yours. So
Sure.
what does that mean for us?
It means that I'm not growing my hair.
Yes.
You know, yours is starting to fall back a little. Don't forget, Jeff Bezos is bald as well.
Is bald as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
A great
Yeah.
CEO can also.
They can have great hair or no hair.
Or no hair at all. There we go. There we go. So I'm so excited to dig into your story, Jessica, and your story, of course, like all of our stories, started before Unstoppable. And tell us, before we dig into your story a little bit, just tell us quickly about yourself. What your background is, where you are in life.
Yeah, for sure.
Where are you from, by the
Good
way? I was about to
question.
ask before the podcast. So.
I'm from outside of Pittsburgh, so rural Pennsylvania. I grew up in the country on a little horse farm, and
Wow.
I lived there, up until I went to college. I went to Penn State 4 years, and then after that, I moved to Washington, D.C., where I really didn't know what I was doing in my life, but I ended up pursuing photography as my business. But a little bit about where I'm at now. I'm almost 33 right now, and I moved to Charleston about 5 years ago now from D.C., and that came about actually as a God thing, more in hindsight. But my life in DC was a little bit chaotic. I would say I probably was the furthest I've ever been from God in that season. But He brought me back around, So I'm really grateful that I made my way to Charleston, and that's a good story to share would be just when I did first get to Charleston, and how I got involved with Seacoast in itself was just definitely a God thing. I mean, I hadn't been going to church in years, and I grew up in,
So did you grow up in church?
Yeah, I was just going to say I grew up in a Christian household.
Yeah.
We went to church, but, I always say, we didn't even have a Bible at home. We didn't really pray as a family, and if we did, it was like a Catholic, ritual prayer, maybe at the holidays. And I felt okay, my family, my aunts and uncles would say Jesus loves you, grandma, grandpa, sort of thing. But that's kind of as far as it went, I didn't really understand about having a relationship with God, what that meant. And half the time, or more than half the time at church, I didn't understand anything, I was just all right, we got through it, and usually it was just, Christmas and Easter. Or
Did you personally pray at all? Did you?
Actually, great question. Yeah, I did find myself praying, and I always found myself like questioning if I was doing it right, but definitely like in the harder times, I'd be like, I just remember being like in bed, just like maybe crying, like maybe it was like when I lost a grandparent or something, just
Yeah.
like crying out, like, why is
Yeah.
this happening? But also kind of feeling peace around like knowing like I know they're with you. And that was like my probably
Yeah.
initial actual like start of a relationship with God.
So your perspective of God, you didn't read the Bible yourself.
No.
So your perspective
Yeah.
was what you experienced on a Sunday at Mass,
Exactly.
what the priest said or whatever, or people around you said.
Yeah.
And then growing up, you didn't have that personal connection with God, but then did that start in Charleston?
Yes, it did. So actually, it was a love interest that initially brought me to church. That'll do it, right?
Sorry, I love interest.
Yes,
I
yes,
love interest.
yes.
I've never heard that.
I like that a lot.
I love interest.
Are you a love interest?
You were a love interest for me. I'm telling you, when I saw you on the
Funny.
front row at that church, that was like a love interest.
I
Okay.
was gonna say just friend, but I'm like, I don't know if a friend would have done it at the time. But I'm really grateful for him, and that was like not a very long season. Knowing that person.
Dating him?
Yeah, well, we started to, and then like I remember him bringing me to church and being around his family, who they had been in the church forever, and they're talking to Jesus out loud all the time, and I kind of think they're crazy a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I even remember like when I first moved down here, seeing people, at Chick-fil-A praying before a meal. I'm like, they're just praying before everything, like all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Oh my
really
goodness.
felt like it was too good. I was like, that's not real.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because like moving over from Switzerland, I would pray in a Starbucks with with somebody in a conversation or whatever. But like even me as a pastor, I'd make sure that I was like, not offending and not praying that loud.
Yeah.
And then I come here and the Starbucks, I remember on my first time coming into a Starbucks, there was two people reading the Bible as I entered in, and then there was somebody praying on the next table, and then somebody asked me, I saw you at Seacoast, and it was like literally every single person had some kind of faith element to their conversations. Yeah.
Definitely a unique thing about Charleston, and it's black and white with where I came from, which was DC. And of course, I don't think I was really searching for it, but neither was it really ever like in my face either. So.
Yeah. So you came to church and
So he brought me. It was actually the James Island campus that was in the theater that I don't think is open anymore. But
so for those of us who don't know about Seacoast has about 13 different campuses in different areas of Charleston,
I
and
think it's 14 now.
in South Carolina and North Carolina, and one of them is in James Island.
Yes, and this particular one actually in a movie theater, which, you walk in, there's the worship band that's like really good, but I'm like, we're in a movie theater and everyone's raising their hands. Like, I'd never experienced anything like it. And that was pre-seeing the Mount Pleasant campus, So I was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to go back, and I don't even remember who was preaching that day, but I just remember being like, wow, like I can really like relate to this pastor. And I felt like a sense of community, even like after the service, like everyone kind of in the front gathering, and like everyone like knows each other here, like this is really cool. I feel like maybe I'll come back, know. And I did a couple times with him, and then things didn't work out in that regard, but I'd actually had a neighbor who's still one of my mentors to this day. I just had lunch with her the other day, Renee, and I call her like my Charleston mom. And she was in my neighborhood, actually hired me for a photography project. But even before I did that project, she asked me to go to lunch, and I'm thinking like, you want to hire me? Like, I'm so used to just a transactional business relationship. So that immediately impressed upon me. And then, of course, she prayed for us at lunch and had asked me, like, about my faith, not as if that was the reason she was hiring me or not, but just that's like the kind of person she is. And I did the project for her, and then she stayed in touch. But she also said, like, so I didn't have a car at the time. I moved here from DC without a car. And she's like, you're right on the way to church if you ever want to pick, me to pick you up. And so I went with her and her family for like probably a good year, not every weekend, because some weekends I was too hungover. That's another part of my story, but it felt like even in those darker moments where I felt like I shouldn't be here, like God just kept pulling me back in, and like I think she knew I was going through stuff, but she was just like loved on me so well.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit. But before we do, was there a point where you made a decision to follow Christ?
Yeah, I mean, in that season, like I felt like I was already like turning, but I was kind of like, I guess probably a little lukewarm, where it was like I knew I wanted to, but I still wasn't being disciplined enough to like fully give my heart. It was like I felt like I know I believe God, but I'm not acting accordingly. So like what is that? Is that a real believer? You know, and that's kind of who I'd been like my whole life. Where it's like I feel like I have this faith, but would somebody look at me and be like, they're a Christian, they love God, and you know, what would that say about me, sort of thing. So I feel like that was like a stepping stone period.
Yeah, it's so good. So when you think about when you tell us a little bit about your time here in Charleston before you made that decision, before you started living out that faith. What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, the first year or so here, I mean, trying to like make new friends and make community, and let's see, you know, Renee was in my life, which was great, and then that little relationship kind of fell apart, which was tough, and then I ended up actually about a year into living here. I'd had a pretty bad physical injury. I broke my back, my T7 I fractured, and that was something that really like shook me in a way that like I'm a very physically active person. I feel good when I'm working out, and suddenly I'm like told like I need to just lay in bed for 2 months and work my way into like movement, you know. So that really shook me, and I think again that like this is like building more momentum towards like just being closer to God, because I'm just like not understanding like why is this happening to me. But that was like a season where he was saying like you don't need all these things to like feel okay, like it's within you no matter what. And so I guess like just like the stripping away of like my identity as like an athlete, or just like being able to do certain things like physically, or like looking a certain way. I feel like that was a season of just like, you know, you are loved like no matter what, and like you can be okay without being able to do these things. But it was really hard to sit still. It was a time of reflection, and then that was a year prior to COVID happening, and that was like another season for me where things were really shaken up. I don't know if you want to go into that right now, but
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess and then when COVID did happen, so as a business owner and working in the events industry, I mean, everything pretty much came to a halt like overnight. I mean, I didn't know it at the time. I was very hopeful, like, oh no, next month, like we'll have events. Oh, next month, you know. But like looking back, it's like, like everything pretty much got like the rug ripped out from under me right then. And that was about 6 months after that like back injury. And so like, again, in hindsight, that was almost like a blessing that I had to be resting in this period, because my job is physically demanding, and I probably would have just pushed through when I shouldn't have. But again, like having to sit still and and not having just like the success of my business, the financial stability. I mean, I've been taking pictures since 7th grade, and it's been my full-time business for almost 10 years. So to have that just taken away was very hard. And it was definitely like a season of depression for me. And I was simultaneously in a romantic relationship at the time that was very like highs and lows. And a lot of it with like some things that were going on in his personal life, and then mine, all wrapped up in just like the world at the time. And then you throw my crutch since I was 16, which was drinking alcohol, into the mix. It got very chaotic. Like it's all almost like a blur when I look back at it. But like it was something I now look back as like I'm so grateful it all happened, because that's like how I ended up really walking with the Lord in the end.
So things are spinning out of control.
Yes.
COVID, I mean, that really helped, a lot of people, things spun out of control during COVID. Before Jessica continues, is there anything that you'd like to add to the conversation? No? So like, things are spinning out of control, and now you're starting to drink more.
Mm-hmm.
Are you drinking a lot?
Yeah. So I would say like the foundation of like that relationship too was like drinking. And one of the things like for just me individually, like I'd always used it as like this almost like a permission to like let loose, right? Like permission to have fun, to be outgoing, because I am a more reserved person. And I felt like, guys want this like outgoing, bubbly, fun person. And like, I have that within me. It's circumstantial and depends on if I'm actually like enjoying my company. Which, I can talk about that more later with just like how I got through like the not drinking part. But just like I realized like, oh, maybe it's not about like me not being able to like let loose. It's more like maybe I need to choose my company a little bit better, But to rewind into that, and we were, like, I guess, foundationally, like dating in the early stages of our relationship was like a lot of going out to bars, and like sometimes the night was like a bit of a blur. And he'd had history with divorce and was like fighting to get custody of his children. And I don't have to go into all that, but like it was very stressful for him. But like he would take it out on me, and there was definitely a lot of anger, and I would say like emotional like abuse that came out. And then I would just kind of like blame myself. Well, like I shouldn't really be like drinking and doing this anyway, and like he has so much on his plate, like it's fine. And then it was kind of this cycle of like lashing out and then like talking about it, usually like some dramatic gesture to like redeem himself, and then the cycle would repeat, like we're good, let's go out on a date, and then it's just drinking, and then the same thing. And it's like that's almost been kind of like the cycle of my life, like with drinking, and it could just be anything.
Wow. So you've moved down from Washington. You're down in Charleston. You've had encounters with God, encounters with other mentors, church-wise or whatever, and then it's all taken away through COVID, and then you're getting into this more depressive, more downtime. And so when did it hit the crunch? Like, was there a point where it was like, oh my goodness, this is
there was a moment, and it's honestly something I like. Not a lot of people know like the full story, as I'll say. I'll give you kind of like the sugar-coated version, to be honest. But that what I just described, that cycle, like there was like one specific night where it was just the worst of the worst, and it was like couple shots too many at the end of the night. It actually like ended with like physical violence. And I remember actually like pleading out like to God, like I need to like get out of here safely. But again, like that night in itself is like it's a little blurry, but it's actually the morning after that I remember. I had like stayed at his house that night, and my parents were actually in town, so I went back home, but I wasn't ready to go home. I'm like, they're gonna know something's off. And I actually like went and parked in my parking lot on the other side away from my home, and I remember climbing into the back seat and laying there and just literally like weeping, like something's got to change. Like, I don't know if this is my fault or like why this is happening. Like, and also like just that I feel like this person truly loves me, but he's like now hurt me. Is so, like, I just couldn't wrap my head around it, but I knew like I needed God, and I knew I needed to make some changes in my life. And it really was like the start of like consistent conversation with the Lord. And I mean, there weren't other changes that were immediately made, but like, and even in that morning, I wasn't like, I'm quitting drinking forever. That's like a story in itself. But it ended up being that was like, I never touched alcohol again after that. And that's what I see as the moment of like really like finally like grasping like I need God to do this. And then it's kind of bled over into other areas of my life too, realizing that.
Let's talk about that in a minute, but let's talk about that just for a second. We look at that also at Unstoppable, that God allows, God is the author of life. The Bible says that all good gifts come from God. So that means that things that are negatively happening in our lives are not from God. They're from the enemy, who came to, kill, steal, and destroy. But God allows these situations to happen so that we can experience his power in our lives. And it's so good how you realize this was a situation. You could continue, and I'm sure if you look into your past, there were situations that you just continued down that track because it was too hard maybe to go to take a turn, or was too hard to get out of it, or whatever that is. But that was a point in that moment where you said, this is it. Like, God, help me. I remember one of my pastors said to me, there's certain prayers that God always answers, and one of them is help. Help. He always answers that, and so that's good. What does that look like for you, Brian, Rebecca? Anything to add?
I think I would just say, Jessica, like, thank you so much for sharing this. That story you told, that happens to so many people all the time. And it's a lot of it is, and I've struggled with drinking too, and I've had those nights where you're yelling and you're screaming, bad things happen, like, and you wake up and you don't remember what you did. It happens a lot. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times when you start dating somebody, the easier thing is like, let's go grab dinner, you have a couple drinks to loosen up, and then that does become a pattern. And it's really, really hard to quit. I think I told the story before, like a couple of my friends that I grew up with, like, they're going through divorces, and it's usually because of alcohol. They just kept on, like, that's their fun, that's what they do to get away. And I've seen it destroy a lot of relationships and a lot of marriages, and I just give you a ton of credit for noticing that and making that change. It's hard. It's really hard.
That's good, Brian.
And especially, what I think it's special too, sometimes you hear it because they went through really challenging things and they wanted to kill it. But your example is almost, you wanted to loosen up. So it wasn't even that bad, but you just a little bit more, and how a little bit more can guide you to another place. And so good that you could experience feeling God is here and he's a help. But when you realized help, and this was the start of something new, when was there a place when you started having people involved in your journey, or sharing, or even coming out with, hey, this is what's happening to me, or that's my new plan?
Yeah, good question, because it was a lot of the friends I'd chosen to be around, were drinkers and things, and not that makes them bad. They didn't necessarily have like the issues that I was having around it. But to my surprise, I remember being like really kind of afraid to share with certain friends, like, hey, I'm like taking a break from out, because I'd never done that. Like, maybe did a dry January once, probably like barely made it through. But it was kind of unheard of to go even more than like a week, without drinking. So, and not to like throw my family under the bus, like, I think they're doing the best that they can with what they know, but definitely some drinkers there, and like that's how we bonded a lot. So it's kind of like weird to tell them, when that for a long period, like, well, half my life at this point, like that's going home or being on vacation with them, like that's what we do. And it was just uncomfortable to be like, I'm like, well, no, they're like, I knew they'd still like love me sort of thing, but it just felt scary. Like, are they gonna support me? And like, of course they did, and they still do, which I'm really grateful for.
I find that the hardest thing ever. I stopped drinking about maybe 6 months ago. It's the hardest thing ever when you go out to a restaurant or whatever, or you go to a friend's house or whatever. It's like the only option is water. Because like
club soda and lemon, okay?
Club soda and lemon. I can't be drinking Coke the whole time.
Yeah, because especially if it's late at night, then you're gonna be awake. Like I love like sweet tea or like I never used to drink soda, but now like my things, because I don't drink, I'm like, oh, I get the calories in dessert, or like something I used to not say no to. So that's like my little treat. Like I have little ritualistic things I still do, because I realize like once I've gained the confidence to be myself again through God's work, like I think it was really just like not fully loving myself or being able to like own who I am as a person, right?
Yeah.
And that was definitely a process, and especially like after that relationship, feeling like I not only end up losing a person that I cared about, like I totally lost sight of myself.
Yes.
And, like rediscovering who I am, and being okay with that person, like actually loving that person, being like, no, like this, I'm okay. And I actually feel like the most empowered and confident that I've ever felt, like going out, like especially if it's like a group of people, like everyone has a drink, like I don't know, like I don't say it to anybody, but I'm almost kind of like, hey, like you guys need that stuff, like I don't, which, and especially the people that knew me before, like I think probably some of them like never thought I'd see that coming, party animal kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
hard to imagine you as a party animal, Jessica.
People say,
all right. So you're now at crunch time, and how did it evolve? When you cried out that prayer, help me? Yeah. What happened?
Yeah.
How did God answer that prayer?
It's interesting. I mean, I think like the first things that he kept telling me that week was like to get brutally honest with myself and who I was spending my time with. And what's interesting is like there were so many moments before that weren't nearly as like traumatic as that, but like things throughout college and just other times where like I'd like blacked out or something and like realized like, wow, I really lucked out that night. Like that could have went a different way. That you think like I would have cried out, but I didn't. So I asked like, why in this moment, but what's interesting is that even though I knew I had to make a change, what actually kind of kept me on that path was my boyfriend at that time. He came to me, like we didn't talk for like a week, and even though I knew I needed to get rid of him after like what happened, I felt like God was working through him. Like he like said, I want to lay this down forever. And to me, I was kind of scared to like do it alone. So I was like, all right, let's give it a try. And like we stayed together and we quit like cold turkey. And but honestly, like I don't know if he wasn't a part of my life, if I would have done it for myself, which is sad. But like that's where I was at with loving myself. Like I didn't. Like I cared about him more than me, I think, which is like not healthy at all. And so, but
isn't it amazing how we can care for others, sometimes care for our animals, our dogs, our cats more than we will care for ourselves.
Yes.
Like we feed our animals, better food and tell them not to eat this and not to drink that, but we don't do it with our own bodies, with our own selves.
Yeah, that's how it is. But it was all just like a part of that process with like God just really speaking to me and being very patient and things. But, eventually like I realized like what I was receiving from that partner like was not love. It was like other manipulation. There might have been a little bit in there, but just like there was so much like trauma like wrapped up into us. Like there was this like trauma bond, right? But those initial steps towards like not drinking, I mean, I had somebody who I at the time thought cared about me to an extent, going through that path. And, you know, we go to social gatherings and it was like both of us that are like not drinking, you know. Now it doesn't like, it's not intimidating at all because I've just done it so much. But at the time it felt like I was showing up like without an eyeball or something. Like it felt so uncomfortable.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and
so he helped you going, both of you quitting at the same time and going to church together.
Mm-hmm.
And did you meet? So how did Seacoast play a role in that?
Yeah. So we were going to church like most Sundays, but I would say like, you know, we'd get the prompt to join a small group or dream team or all these things, and we'd always say like, hey, we should do that. But like,
did you ever text connect to 20?
I did.
You get like 700 texts after that.
I know. There was something like just that was still like isolating me within that relationship, and I won't give him full credit for that. I have to take my own responsibility in that, but I felt like we were both just like isolated from the world, and like it was just this weird like kind of had a grip on each other but didn't really like want to connect. But there was, I remember one weekend towards like almost the end of our relationship when I was like, hey, like we should join a small group together. And I remember him saying like why would I ever like want to do that with you kind of thing. Like he kind of was saying like he just doesn't like respect me. I don't remember his exact words, but I was just like, where's this coming from? And I mean, in hindsight, it was coming from that he started like a whole life with somebody behind my back. And so we don't have to get into that, but like was like ended up being my final straw with him, which then was like my point when I like stepped into my first small group at Seacoast.
So you stepped into your small group. You've got a new family, a new community. Yeah. It's going well. You're growing in that community and whatever. And when did Unstoppable come along? Was that?
Yeah. So that was about, let's see, a year after, like almost exactly after like that moment of like the breakup and being like, wow, I've been here like 3 years and I don't have anyone now. I felt like, and you know, it was a combination of COVID and just like going through the not drinking, and it was quite a season. And so
how did you hear about it?
Yeah, it was through friends, actually, small group, which that was like the second small group I joined that year, which it's surprising. Like I went from like nothing for like 3 years, like in addition to Sundays, to 2 small groups, and it really was like pivotal for me. But yeah, it was a couple people that had gone through the program and said like, this sounds like you. Like I have always been into like Tony Robbins and like self-help, and now that I'd like turned to the Lord, I'm thinking like, you know, as great as those programs are, they're always like just so like me. Like I really like feel like my heart's like changing into like, this isn't all about me. Exactly. And like I want to serve and I want to build community and like, how do I do that? And you know,
I remember at one time you said when you came in, I asked you, you know, how you heard about it, and then you heard about it all and you said, this sounds like Tony Robbins meets Jesus.
Yes,
like, that's a great way to frame. That is a great way to frame it. Yeah,
I've always admired and respected it, and I've done like a lot of his programs, like, you know, pre-Jesus in my life that were like pivotal. But it's funny because I remember like going through some of those programs in DC, but I would still end up like, I don't know, like there was still something missing, and a lot of times I would like end up like on the internet looking for answers, and it would like take me to like a Bible verse, you know, like I felt like looking back, like I see like God working on me even when I didn't want him to. I don't think I needed him
it was
to.
kind of taking you by your hand. I like it, by the way.
So good. So what were some of your key takeaways at Unstoppable, or how did you experience it? What did God do in you through that experience?
For sure. Well, since you know like the background of like the breakthrough and the turning, I and wanting to walk with the Lord, it was like, I had that big moment. I made like a really big change in my life that impacted like every area of my life. The, relationships, like discipline with money, gotten a lot better, and just like love for myself, like receiving God's love, just like really changed everything. And so like I'm at this point where I'm climbing out of this like depression season and wanting to like, I'm no longer feeling like I just want to get through the day. I'm more like, okay, I want to get out there and like do something. And I'm starting to feel like the passion in my life again, and like wanting to succeed in my career, and not again like coming from this phase of just getting by to like wanting to make things happen. But this time it's different because it doesn't feel like it's just about myself. And
that's good.
but like I've always like been a like purpose seeker, like what is my purpose? But now it's like, how can I align that with like my God-given purpose, not just like what I think it is, but like really like my full potential, which is like a lot more than I think I was even imagining before. And also just like, even though I, recommitted my life to the Lord, it was like, I, of course, wasn't suddenly perfect, believe it or not. And so going through that process was kind of a reminder of like, having grace with myself, and while finding that purpose, I think the whole like peaks and valleys, and like kind of like going back into the highs and lows of my life, really taught me that like my purpose is already like within me. I don't have to like keep looking for it. Like God has given it to me, and like the things I've been through are my power, and like my testimony is powerful, and I don't really have to do anything extra to like feel okay at the end of the day. Like it's accessible.
Yeah, that's so good. We do a Kairos life map. Where's that? In one of the chapters in the book.
What book you have there, Tim?
Unstoppable Growth book. Let's go. Go to unstoppablegrowth.org, and you can order the book there. But it's in Uncover Your Why. And in order to get to your why, we have a Kairos life map. And I love the way you framed that, because I don't think I wrote about it like that in the book, in the sense that people are always looking for their purpose out there. And if you look back into your experiences, and I'd love to hear afterwards, how has your past experiences really helped you find your purpose, and how you're helping others? Maybe that's in your why statement. But is there anything that you want to talk about on that, like going through the Kairos life map and experiencing how people are finding their purpose through that experience? Nothing from your side, Brian? Nothing. All right.
No, you too.
I'm doing all the talking today.
Activity. It's my least favorite day, but like during the day, but in hindsight it was like, no, that's like was probably the most like profound thing, that was like, these are all gifts. And then it's also helped me going forward, like even it's not like I'm just because I found my purpose I'm never gonna have a struggle again. Like, no, it's just easier to kind of take the struggles as like, these are all gonna serve a purpose. Like, even if I'm in pain right now, like it'll serve a purpose, which some days is easier than others to say that.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Jessica. I think it was when I did my power, it was tough to look back at some of the mistakes I made and then I continued to make. But similar to you, when you look back, you're like, God was there. Like, I shouldn't have survived that, or I should have gotten a lot of trouble. Like, and I know she said the same thing. You can look back and be like, God was there. We just weren't listening at the time.
Yes.
And even with your story, you showed you looked for outside help, like you took alcohol, you had relationship to help you changing or becoming different, and then realizing God is someone that is here in it with me. And he had put things in me that they only have to be called out, or I have to declare them, and then I start living it. And that's a new pattern. And that's why it's so hard to look at your Kairos life map and look into your pain in your highs and your lows, because you used just to stay away from and to walk away from it. And so I love that your experience was, okay, with God's help, I'm still loved. I can look at it. And this actually gives me the clarity to see that's who I am. That's what he made me to. And now I can even invite others to be part of. Not necessarily have to go and walk through the same pain, but even the voice of, hey, I think part of your why statement was to help others.
And
Yes, let's go. So, where Jessica has gone through the Unstoppable Growth experience once or twice.
Just once.
Just
but then
once?
The coaching.
And so, so we're going, and now she's gone through, I don't know what we're calling it, leadership training, leadership academy is a word that somebody.
I like academy.
Academy going around.
Actually, Brian and Jessica are going through it.
Yeah, so Brian and Jessica are going through it, and it's been absolutely awesome. And one of the things that we revisited was the why statement. And you reworked your why statement.
I did.
And so, do you know it off by heart?
Yeah, so I have it listed here because I don't want to mess it up for this,
Okay,
but
okay.
it's pretty.
All right, let us.
And also, I'll say I changed it from being more kind of focused on like helping others in addiction to being like a little bit broader with like where I could have an impact, every day.
Yeah.
Helping.
So tell us the
helping
why
others.
statement.
So to prompt people to pause and reflect by being super curious so they overcome strongholds through realignment of priorities.
Wow. To prompt people by
Pause and reflect.
To pause and reflect. So that's in there. That's really good, because I remember as we were reworking your why statement, you went back to your Kairos life map in the sense that you said, okay, where was I?
Right.
What did I experience? What would I have liked others to do in my life? And I remember you saying, I would have loved people who just asked me questions, so I would have stopped and just thought about my life and reflected. So you're prompting through curious questions.
Curiosity.
Through curiosity, all right? And then?
And the goal is that they will realign their priorities, you know? And that is, it's very personal, because I think all the moments where I did stop and reflect, even if I didn't change my mind, like they were slowly like building up to like a big breakthrough.
Yeah, totally. So, have you had experiences in the in-between time where you've been able to live that out?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like kind of every day to a degree. And then, like, specifically with the drinking breakthrough, when you're somebody who goes out and you're the only one ordering water, like, you get questions, I used to be, like, kind of cringe, but now it's, like, I, like, love if somebody's curious about it and they want, to ask me about it, but then I try to, like, engage them in questions that are non-judgmental, but just, as somebody who relied on it for so long, like, I find it really cool when people are like, I should consider, like, not doing this so much, or like, how did you do it? It's exciting to me, because it's been like the truest form of freedom like I've experienced without it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Very
so
cool.
Good.
I love that. Even for the listeners, is so often we take one step after the other without realizing what am I really doing. And with your why statement, and if you go through Unstoppable, you discover your why statement, which helps you to, we always say, make it as easy as possible, that you in the evening when you reflect, that you can say, was I able to leave it out today? And in the morning when you pray for it, Lord, maybe give me encounters where I can leave it out again. But we do live in a world where so many don't reflect anymore, don't think so much. They may be scared of tomorrow because they feel the pressure, but they're not really finding themselves, who am I in that? And so having people like you around that helps in prompting a question, what's really going on in my life, can really change the direction of where they're going. And so maybe you're listening in and you're asking similar question, or you're struggling with some things that you realize it's hard to get out of, their patterns, maybe their addictions, maybe they're people in your life. Just know that there's a God
Yeah.
You can start with saying help, and he's there, and he will give you the clarity. And even in that moment, it's maybe just the comfort of you're not alone. And he's one that never leaves or forsakes you. It's very often, it's us not turning to him. It's us not making those bold decisions of maybe doing it without feeling it. I mean, that moment when you decided, you didn't felt you love yourself or the people around you love yourself, but you still did it anyway. And that's very often the start. Just turn to him, talk to him, do it anyway, and then be surprised how he responds. And then it's really, I mean, write to us, get the book, sign up for a course. We start again in February. It's also unstoppablegrowth.org that you can sign up for the waitlist when we open up again. But it is definitely, you're not alone, and you don't have to stay alone. Reach out and maybe find a church, find a small group like you did, Jessica. Maybe start with one.
I'd love if we could like just share your why statement. I know we're closing now or whatever, but what's your why? My why statement. So like when I'm listening to these kind of podcasts and somebody shares their why statement, I'm like, okay, what's the other guy's why statement? You know, I want that example. I want, because I'm thinking through what my why statement is, and it's chapter 5 in the book that we actually lead people through the process of creating your very own why statement. You can literally read the chapter, do the exercises, and come out on top with your why statement. And what's been very good in our process here has been that Jessica shared her why statement once. We all sort of reflected on it and gave our feedback, shared it twice, and you went through a couple of times, a couple of variations until you nailed what you felt was, and you'll change it in the future a little bit, you'll tweak it in the future a little bit, as I have, because like the why statement that I have is in the book and I've already tweaked it. So
you're in the process of tweaking yours, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I think I've nailed it now. I think it's like, it's so when I say changing or tweaking the why statement, I really mean tweaking it, because your why statement really always stays the same. It's just a different variation of it to help you simplify it for yourself and be able to communicate it. But mine is to inspire others through passionate communication so that they take their next step.
That sounds a lot like mine, doesn't it?
Did I steal yours? Or are you stealing mine?
I don't know which way it goes.
So what's your why statement, Rebecca?
To empower others by asking questions to reveal truth so that they can experience true transformation.
All right, awesome. Ryan?
To inspire others through my story so they can take their next steps with Jesus Christ.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I added Jesus on mine.
You added Jesus on yours?
You dropped him.
Oh, I dropped it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. Anybody who's still listening to the podcast, made it all the way to the end, would you do us a favor and would you just go to the place where you listen to the podcast and would you like it there? Would you share it or maybe write a comment in on it that helps other people see the podcast, that helps other people engage with Unstoppable Growth, that helps other people experience transformation?
Yeah, and I think Jessica's story is such a powerful story for so many people.
Yeah.
Please share it. Please subscribe.
Yeah.
So we can get that story out there.
Jessica, I didn't ask you before the podcast, but would you be willing to pray for the people who are listening and viewing and people who have gone through similar situation as you have?
Yeah, sure, for sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. This has been great.
Awesome.
Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for this time, for these great leaders in our community and for the Unstoppable community as a whole. They've really just breathed life into my soul. In dark places that I didn't know that there could be light, to be honest. And just thank you, Lord, for all the work that you've done specifically in me and within my story and my difficult places where I didn't think there was possibility to have freedom, Lord. I just pray that anyone that's out there struggling with such things as alcohol addiction or abuse cycles, that they would reach out and that they would know that you are always there, no matter how lonely they might be, that there's always you. They can always cry out to you and that those moments would allow them the freedom to take their next steps towards you, Lord, and that they would just know that there's also always community, and that they would be bold in taking those next steps, because for me, that's really where the transformation happened, is having people around me, that community, and just people that would keep me on the path, Lord. And I'm just so grateful for the people that stepped into my life in times where it probably seemed very much a mess. And I just pray that you'd place such people in the lives of others who are struggling in such ways, and that eventually those stories that they have, those shameful moments that they may live through, would become their power, the power of their testimony. And I pray that would really set them free, Lord. Again, I'm just so thankful for this time, and I just am so grateful that I have this community, and in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.